Welcome to the EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Dhriti Rai, Assistant Professor in the Department of Museology, University of Calcutta. Today we will study about museum staff, their role and responsibilities. As you know, there are so many activities within the museum, so each and every museum has to appoint staff accordingly. They have administrative role, they have curatorial role, and they also need a strong security line. So when we will study the museum staffs, its roles and responsibility, we need to focus on to about the staff structure that we required in a museum, to know about the different staff role in a museum, and to know their responsibilities within the museum. You can go through various books where you can find the details about these staffs, their roles and responsibilities. Like you can go through the book of managing museums in India, building museums, care of collection, museum careers and museum administration. These are the readily available books on this topic. You can go through it. When you look into the museum needs many people to run its various day-to-day activities. A notable and good museum largely relies upon its staff member. The governing body is responsible for appointing all the staffs in high level. Actually, the staff positions and responsibilities are appropriate to the need and the financial resources of that museum. Staff pattern varies from one to another museum in India. There is no fixed structure that is available in each and every museums in India. We will find different structure in different museum according to their nature of object, according to their nature of status, the size, the font and everything. So museum needs special experts also for developmental work, fundraising, coordinating with volunteers, supervising docent, public relation and for the special needs. But there is a basic structure that we need, that every museums more or less they follow. One is the hierarchical pattern, another is the matrix pattern, another is the last one is the task force. In case of hierarchical model, hierarchical staff pattern, you will find there is a director or director general at the top, and in a horizontal in a vertically there are so many staff structure. It will look like a pyramid. It more or less a pyramidal structure. It is a well-defined defined vertical chain of command from top to bottom. Director General of the museum heads this pyramid. Below him are other different level of power. The horizontal communication is less defined as to be ensured through the committees. For example, the functionaries below him are below the Director General are the Assistant Director, maybe directors, then Director Generals, then curators, then Assistant Curators. In another vertical there will be keeper, assistant keeper, like this. So this is the hierarchical pattern. If you see this chart, you can find in case of National Council of Science Museum, they run lot of museum across the India. So there is only one Director General, and under him there are so many directors who are responsible for each and every separate museums and science centers. Like there is a director in VITM, there is a director in VITM, that is the Visheshwaraya Industrial Technological Museum in Bangalore. So there is another director for National Science Center. So under the one Director General, there are so many directors who run the separate museum or centers. Under the director, there are coordinator, curator, technical assistant, and so on. So basic structure for the hierarchical pattern starts in this way, from top to bottom. The second model is the matrix structure. In a matrix format, functions are organized and as an axis of interaction. For example, exhibition, education, publication, these are the separate wing and separate and individual wing. And curator, conservator, registrar, security, they communicate all these wings. These are known as the matrix structure, where there are 2-3 pillars and the communication bodies. So apart from this, there are the task force structure. Task forces these are not the permanent structure. It depends on the need of a museum. And it is a setup when a special project, program or exhibition is to be organized within the museum. In a task force, representatives of various departments are co-opted as accomplished a special task. It has its own delegate power which cut through the hierarchical pyramid. This is completely separate than the hierarchical structure and the matrix structure. So these are about the structure of staff that are practicing within the different museums in India nowadays. So apart from the structure, we now come to the staff division. What are the division of staffs that are available in the museums? What are the basic requirements of the staff in the museums? So then you need to think about the function of museum. So function of museum is, one is the administration, another is the curatorial. So that is a different thing because it is a public service organization and their objects are displayed for the visitors. So we need to maintain a two parallel side, that is, one is administration and one is curatorial, and more than that we need a security pattern to protect the treasure of our country, the antique objects within the museum. Other than this administration, curatorial and security, there are so many other personnel also there in museum. We can consider or put into them the other group of staffs division. So come to the administrative role and their responsibilities. Who are these administrative personnel? They are the director, they are the assistant director, the keeper, like that. So administrative staff are responsible for the running of the entire administration or management operation like human resource, finance, marketing, maintaining the quality of museum. These are their job. All the national museum, as I told, run by these governing bodies, national by the Director General. Under him there are so many directors. In case of Indian Museum, there is a Board of Trustee instead of Director General, and under this Board of Trustee there is a director who control all the functions of museum. So in case of other museum, the structure are different. In every way, you will find different structure in different museum. In case of Victoria Memorial, Kolkata, the secretary curator is the highest official under the Board of Trustees. Under him, there are so many structure like the administrative officer, education officer, documentation officer. So he is the overall in charge of that museum. Like that, in case of many small museum, only curator is the administrative head. Under him, there are so many assistant curator and other staff who maintain all the separate functions of a museum. So, the governing body affirm the director or any other high official with organizational responsibility to implement the standards in the direction of assignment and his the power of dismissal of the staff. So come to the first, let us look into the responsibilities of Director Generals. He is the highest authority. So what are his actual responsibilities? So he take the leadership of the entire museum. He is the policy maker. He plan and look after the staffing. Work closely with the ministry, because he is this position is just under the Ministry of Culture or any other ministry, or just under the Board of Trustees. So he fulfill the mission of the museum, direct the museum operations to include development, education and public programs, finance, external communication, all that jobs he has to look after. He leads and participates in all fundraising and developmental activities, direct the overall development of public relation and marketing initiatives. He manages and secure all the facilities of museum as well as the collection held for public trust. These were the responsibilities of the Director General. Where there is no Director General or run by the museum only by the director, so he has to perform all these jobs. But where Director General is there and director is also there, so their role and responsibilities of director is little bit different than the Director General. You can see the role of responsibilities of director as he is responsible for the specific function of museum, like entire operation of conservation, exhibition, etc. Work closely with the directors and other curators or Director General. Work with the entire staff to make sure that museum runs smoothly and assist wherever needed in any level. These are the main job of a director. You will find many directors in a museum. So each and every wings, like the director conservation, they look after the conservation unit. Below him there are a deputy director or assistant director. So in case of big museum, you will find so many assistant director or deputy director, like director education, like director exhibition, display or administration, in this way. So director or assistant director or deputy director exhibition, he has the responsibility of looking after the entire exhibition. He look after the curators and deputy curators. Similarly, assistant director conservation, he is responsible for entire care, conservation and preservation work. Like in case of administration, he look after the library administration, other administrative service of the museum, including the curatorial work, library, information service, administrative officer. These are under, they work under him. Apart from the administrative officer or the director, another important wings in every museum is the finance department. So finance department is headed by finance officer or accountant. They coordinate with all the finance staff in financial planning and strategy. They prepare and monitor museum's current fiscal year budget, perform all responsibilities assigned as museum cashier. They processes accounts payable as account receivable, manages museum purchase policies and procedures. They provide status update. They look after the museum collection, interpretation. All these are wherever the fund is necessary to run the projects or the exhibition. So he will be the responsible person to provide or to arrange the fund for different operations and to convey all this to the director. Apart from this financial role and this administrative job, the main and other thing is the curatorial operation for each and every museum, because curatorial operation means how a museum display an object for visitors, how they can design their exhibition, what messages they will give, what is how they can portray the importance of objects to the visitors. So all this come under the curatorial work. So the curatorial division is little bit different than the administrative work. So curatorial responsibilities are in large museum, they often separated from the curator among the other several distributed among the several individuals. They may be collection curator, exhibition curator, education curator, and chief curator who supervises the others specialist curator. Museum sometimes appoints specialist curator also for a specific object or specific temporary exhibition. Curators often have an advanced degree in art history or maybe the doctoral degree, because they are the very qualified, the expert person who has immense knowledge about the object. So in this way, the curator's jobs are distributed within the museum to display and to exhibit, design and everything for visitors. So we can specify curator as he is responsible for the he direct the acquisition, storage and exhibition of collection, look after negotiation and authorization of purchase, sale, exchange. He authenticate, evaluate and categorize the specimen in collection. They observe and conduct the institution's research project, involves fundraising and promotion, writing and viewing proposal, tracing the history of ownership, the provenance of work of art, knowing the geographic, personal and commercial route of work of art, and all detailed research work they conduct on the object so that they can present the object in a very better way, very useful way to the visitors and also to the researchers, so that they can use these objects, this information for their research purpose. So these are the different work of curator to curate an exhibit for the visitors. To assist them, under him there are so many assistant curators. These assistant curators design the museum exhibit that are open to the public. They travel to various areas to authenticate work of art for acquisition. They also oversee storage protocol, direct appropriate heading of artifact, or authorize the loan of specified collection to another location. They may also spend significant time in meeting with board members, writing grant proposals or organizing research projects within their department. Some assistant curators' positions are largely research based. In this case, the primary job is conducting research for the museum facilities. So, according to the need of the curation, the assistant curator are assigned with their job, either research work or the designing and display work or the authentication of the objects. So there are so many work that any assistant curators they need to perform within the museum. Apart from this curator and assistant curator, the museum sometimes had to appoint the specialized curator, because museum may not have that expert person within the museum. So they need to appoint or contract any other person and invite other experts or personalities to curate an exhibition within the museum premises. So they sometimes appoint a very big personalities may not be associated with the permanent. They may not be the permanent staff of that museum. They may be the professor. They may be the intellectual person. They may be the artist. So this kind of help a museum need to run a specialized program or the specialized exhibition. So these are the role of a specialized curator. So apart from the curatorial job about the curation of object for the visitor's purpose, many keepers are there in museum. They are also under the hierarchical level under the assistant directors or the directors. It varies from museum to museum. The keepers, they plan, they are responsible for planning, development and maintenance of museum strategies. They prepare detailed project report of work under the head of various sections. They ensure safe custody of museum objects. They attend the delegates who, and they take care of all the narration works to the VIPs and the scholars in the museum to ensure the collection of data and related information for preparation of periodicals, annual reports, etc. So these are the jobs one keeper perform in the museum. They also ensure the attendance of other staff in the museum. So to assist them as a keeper, sometimes some big museum they also have assistant keeper post. But in case of assistant keepers, they generally share the work and they assist the keeper. Other section is the documentation section. Documentation is the registration or the documentation work is a very elaborate process in a museum. When an object enters into the collection of a museum, each and every documentation officer they need to register it in a proper systematic manner, like for proper acquisition, and sometimes they need to deaccession also from the permanent registers. So they have a lot of responsibility to authenticate the object, to make a proper reference of the objects and to document all the information in a very systematic and in a standardized system. So they are responsible for establishment and maintenance of all aspects of documentary system according to the need of the institution. Therefore, they should have knowledge of valid documentation method, information of all documentation about the rules and system. They should be updated about this. They keeps the central documentation of entry, access, registration, borrowing and other list pertaining to item and supplementary material. So they are the technical person about any museum object and deals with the entire documentation, and look after the record keeping of that object into the museum. To assist them, they have documentation. There are so many assistant documentation officer or documentation assistant post in museum. They are the technical person and look after the management of documentation material, data processing and editing of documentation material. They also look after that. Responsible for compilation of list and making of printout of documentation material, approximate selection of material for later documentation processing. So in this way, whatever thing necessary for the entire to perform the entire documentation, they assist documentation officer in all way. So these are the, in this way a documentation unit of a museum runs by the documentation officer and the documentation assistant, because they need to write the information, they need to keep the photographic documentation. So in a group or a team work, they perform the entire job of documentation in museum. In addition, museum have within the function, if you see the functions of museum, there are the documentation, is a display, exhibition, and within that and another function is the education. So each and every museum need an education officer who better know about the how an object can help visitor and they can meet their educational demand. A museum deals with many students, lot of school visit the museums, so many educational programs are designed by the education officer within the museum. So his or her responsibility is to prepare and distribute public material, publicity material, and display material, like they need to prepare the folders and the leaflets also, and exhibition folders. The information they need, this person need to jot down and prepare it. They write plan and report, producing the educational resource or study packs. They also look after the liaisoning with the school, volunteer, community groups and other local bodies, organize school visit, managing budget of the program, generate income via fundraising activities and submitting funding bid. They attend conference, work with curator and documentation officer to help in exhibition. So they plan the tour program. This person also help when a school or any delegate visit to the museum and to help the group with supplying the necessary information to him or guide how to use museum exhibit for their education purpose. So education officer in a museum has a big role dealing with all the educational aspect of museum services. To assist education officer, there are so many gallery guide posts in museum. This gallery guide is also known as docent. Sometimes we refer it as a docent service. This docent actually look after a group of visitors into the museum, and they narrates that they tell about the different and guide about the galleries, objects, and explain vividly the group of visitors about the display, so that they can understand and enjoy the object properly, and they fulfill their they get their satisfaction for their museum visit. And apart from this, we have already done this administrative part and the curatorial function and the educational function, documentation, all these technical functions, those are helpful to design and run a museums. Every museum in addition has a strong conservation unit. And it is a very essential department for each and every museum, because museum display a lot of antique objects, and all the objects need proper conservation care and conservation, and they need to maintain some preservation technique. So for this conservation unit, a very expert conservation officer, conservation assistants are required. So this department is generally in case of very big museum are headed by director conservation. Under him some conservation officer, chemist, they work. So this is the hierarchy pattern of this conservation unit. So conservation officer, they have the responsibility of examining artifacts both visually and using scientific tool, whether any conservation measure is required or not. They keep full conservation record by writing up notes on each and every object, the condition required the preservation material or the conservation measure required during display, within the cabinet, etc. They produce a visual record of the object for identification purpose and to illustrate its condition. They are also look after and monitor and record display in store as well as in the exhibition the present condition of object. So in this way they are actually responsible for the health of object within the museum, both in display and in store, and take measures whenever required, whatever required for any objects. So this is the main job or main responsibility of a conservation officer. So along with them, this conservation officer also work out a creative solution to clean, support, repairing sensitive object. They sometimes restore objects when if it is required. Sometimes give suggestion to change the display measure, and they also are responsible for to fixing the light required for the object within the display area. So in this way, whatever required to proper display of objects, everything regarding the health of objects, everything is looked after by this conservation unit or the conservation officer. These are all the responsibilities of a conservation officer. When need to design, need to display within the exhibition gallery, there is a very significant role of a graphic designer. A graphic designer design posters and brochure about the museum, both hand and on the computer, and they also assist public relation officer in creating advertisement in the museum. They help in creation of museum catalogs. Like designer, like the graphic designer, exhibit designer also have the responsibility to design the display of the exhibit. Like the graphic designer, they prepare the layout and what are the color required, what are the size of the placement of the object. These are decided by the exhibit designer. So exhibit designer has the responsibility to plan layout and display of objects in the space provided for in the museum. They decide the wall color, the arrangement of objects, etc. They also help in display of objects to where to hang, place and install artwork properly or not. These are all looked after by the exhibit designer. So apart from this, there are some public relation officer in museum who look after the entire marketing or the relation with the museum with the target people. Like they are responsible to write and distribute press release and announcement to inform the school and communities regarding what the museum is going to offer for them. They contact television or the press to cover the museum's different activities. So, and assist in this way, they assist museum in publicizing the activities or service for the community. Museum has a museum shop where or the sales counter. So a shop manager is responsible for to place the souvenir object into the shop and is in charge of any selling of object, the souvenir item, and merchandising the object to the general common people. So sometimes many museum has this position of sales officer, a sales person or the museum shop manager, and these are the almost the permanent staff structure. Apart from this, every museum needs some volunteers, interns to run its various activities, because in India every museums run the scarcity of the staff. So sometimes they invite volunteers or interns to perform or to assist in their various activities. These interns and volunteers are generally the fresh pass outs of history graduates, museology person, conservation students. After they passing out their masters, they work into the museum as interns. So they help museum staffs in their whatever department they require, in IT or designing, in exhibition, in education purpose, everything. So volunteers, apart from the volunteers, the interns and both of them, they perform in a contractual basis within the museum. Library is another important function of a museum, because here museum place all his research document, the publication, for the use of common visitors. So library and information officer is there in every museum. He is in charge of the museum's library, books and archives, is in charge for maintenance of and management of and the supervision of the libraries and the archival materials, and assist the visitors whenever he requires. Museum has to appoint a very strong security force to look after its all the objects physically, and they also need to secure object in a particular location. So a security officer is the role of security officer is very important in a museum, so that he need to look after the two things. One is the security of objects and another one is security of visitors, so that visitors may not harm anything or may not do any harm to any objects or exhibit. He is in charge of the safety of all museum objects and ensure that all museum rules are followed. Assist visitors with question. He is stationed throughout the museum during visiting hours. He monitor and report security, safety and fire incident to the supervisor on duty, and complete the required documentation while entering any visitors into the museum. To assist security officer, many security guards are present in a museum. They work under the security officer. They look after the entire security of the galleries and object and post near the each and every galleries, maybe in their uniform or in a civil dress. So these are the job of security officer and the security guard. And museum, in addition to all this staff structure, they have many other and very specialized group of technical staff that they require time to time, like taxidermist. In case of natural history museum, they need to fabricate object, they need to taxidermy the live specimen, that dead state specimen. So museum sometimes appoint taxidermists in the museum. Similarly, a museum need photographer for the documentation purpose and for the display purpose. So there are two kind of staff available in museum in addition to the other set of staff. These are the taxidermist and the photographer. And to structure the galleries, sometimes museum appoints carpenters, building the ground staff. Carpenters sometimes hire separately by the museum official, but earlier days museum had a separate post of carpenter in the museum, because museum need to develop many galleries. They had a job of fixing or the set of a gallery. So in this way, the carpenter and other staffs are responsible. They play a significant role in the museum in display of object. And to help all the staffs, museum had so many building or the ground staff like peons and security, the watchman, like that. So these are all about the staff structure of a museum. If I look into the entire thing, this museum must be administered by professional and trained and qualified staff. The board and staff must be united in their commitment to the institution's mission and responsibilities. No single overall staff guarantee the production of high quality museum performance. So each and every museum staff had to work in a team basis so that they can perform all the functions very well for the common people and maintain the quality in a museum. Thank you.